Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm KMBest. He's Lamby series. As always, we talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap this week. Number 1 on the list is Firehair, probably the most hyped card for this season, which is actually crazy when you consider it's a season that contained Agamotto. Firehair was the card that I saw get the most attention, proving once again that Marvel Snap players love cards that let you double stuff. Firehair will use the on-reveal ability of any on-reveal card that you destroy. So, for example, you can use it with Carnage to repeat an on-reveal ability, you can use it with Killmonger to get the hood happening again, and you can use it with Misery to double up on whatever it is that you want. Lamby, what do you think about Firehair's chances to succeed in this metagame?
Yeah, so like every Marvel Snap player, I also like the fact that I can double up on my effects. And the funny thing is, when I saw this card, the first thing I thought about was like the hood interaction of getting another 1/6 when you pop it, But that feels like it's just scratching the surface, right? Like I know you mentioned to me that there's this Thor thing that you were thinking about with Misery as well. Like you can make the hammer like double up on the effect, and on the final turn it's a lot of points. I think that's also really interesting, right? It's a bit more combo-y, which I think we've been severely lacking for a bit, Like it's always been a lot of like stats in the game right now. But the thing about Firehair is that I feel she's one of those cards whereby there's so little ways to interact with her from your opponent's perspective outside of Red Guardian, Like the card is literally just a 2/3 that has no ongoing, not on reveal, so there's not really a lot of things that can interact with it, So it's probably just gonna sit there on the board until you're ready to go off with a combo or like something to like abuse her effect, And the thing is, usually these kind of effects, sometimes it has there's that once per use kind of tag. This one you can use it infinitely, So I feel like if you get it out early and then you chain multiple ways of popping cards and getting multiple on reveals, this could be something.
There are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight in what you said, and one thing that I wanted to add. When I look at this card, what I look at is like, okay, there are a lot of decks right now that are like, what is my third 2-drop? And a lot of the time, the answer right now is like Gorgon, because people are playing Agamotto, Thanos, Arishem. People are just going to play Gorgon, right? First of all, that's actually pretty bad news for you if you're going to be doing hood stuff already. Like, you don't love when your stuff costs extra, but it might actually end up mattering. In a world where I am trying to play a Thor deck, I know for a fact that at least 2 of the 2-drops I'm playing are going to be Sam Wilson and Iron Patriot, which we'll talk about a bit later, but they're very good. And so that third 2-drop slot could very easily be Firehair. I do think that it's pretty easy to put together a list that conceptually makes a lot of sense in a world where the mid-range core of just like, here's a bunch of good cards, and oh yeah, my top end is Thor's this time, that's not really going to be that hard to build. The interesting thing is if that's going to be worth it. There is a trick that I think that this card can get some really cool things happening with, which is if you Iron Patriot and then Misery the Iron Patriot, you will then have 2 separate Iron Patriot lanes if this is on the board. That's pretty interesting to me. Like, there's a world where you go turn 1 the hood, turn 2 this, turn 3 Iron Patriot in the hood lane, turn 4 Misery the hood lane. And that's like double Iron Patriot triggers. You're getting a bunch of demons. Worry, you might fill your hand up. But that does seem like a legitimately strong thing to do. Like, that feels like a nut draw that actually makes sense. And so it's not just the Thor hammers, it's also that 2 Iron Patriot lanes is very interesting. The fact that you might get double demons with that is very interesting. That kind of stuff is very appealing to me. What I'm not nearly as sure about, though, is what the mid-roll of this deck looks like. I've come up with like 3 use cases that I actually like for Firehair. They are the hood, sometimes Iron Patriot, and Thor hammers. That's pretty inconsistent, and Thor is a deck that needs to be able to draw cards, so it doesn't necessarily want to be putting all of these cards in its hand. And so there's this weird tension where it's like, what are we actually doing other than the hood? And if it is just the hood, that probably isn't enough to make this card actually good, because a bunch of people are probably going to try Mill. We're going to talk about that later. I don't think it's going to be good. And so what is it specifically that's going to break this card? And the best I can give you is Thor's, is what it feels like it can do.
I feel like when this card just releases, it's gonna be that one of those cards whereby it's gonna be in your deck for that one specific use case until people figure out like what's the wombo combo for this, Like there's a lot of cards like these kind of like 2/3s that are easy to just plop onto the board. You'll probably find a use case for it like eventually. It's just that off the top of my head, like you said, right, the Thor stuff feels a bit Like, I mean, it's powerful, but you kind of need a lot of setup for it, you know. So a bit sketchy, but I feel like this kind of card just has a lot of room for exploration.
On to Starbrand in review. I originally advised when I made my Starbrand video that everyone wait until after the OTA to make sure that Surtur didn't get another bonk on the head, and Surtur got maybe the biggest bonk on the head it's actually received so far in the form of the nerf to Sam Wilson, which took his shield to 0 cost, meaning that while he is better with Miss Marvel now, he is much worse with Cull Obsidian, and that means that you now have to start running more 1-drops in the Surtur deck, which to me makes it borderline unbuildable. I now no longer feel like I have enough space in the deck to do all the stuff that I actually want to do. I was relying on Sam Wilson to not have to do what I now have to do, and I feel like that is Starbrand's best deck, or it was, and it got sort of ruthlessly bonked away by the, 8th nerf to the Surtur deck in the last 8 patches. And so this is a card that I feel like is going to be unjustly remembered as a flop, when it's not that he is a flop, it's that they took the deck that he could have gone in and they said, actually, that slot you were going to use on him, you have to use it on a 1-drop now. We are making you do that. And that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I'm a bit more upset about another thing about Starbrand, which is we talked in the previous video whereby just like on the final turn, allocating a 3/10 onto the board to win the lane hasn't really happened enough, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Sarah can do that, right? It could be like a 2/10 Starbrand, which is insane, you know. But we haven't really seen that much of that in the meta, which is a bit upsetting because I feel like that was one of its really good use cases. I guess burst power at the end of the game doesn't beat out the fact that like some decks can just consistently do good things every turn, you know. So yeah, a bit unfortunate. And obviously, Starbrand still has its downside. So you can't really exactly play Starbrand on curve and feel too good about it, right? Like you play it on curve, it's a walking shank target and all that kind of thing. So bit unfortunate. Like the card, but didn't really land very well.
I will also say that like Sarah has another problem, which is like I find it
Mobius.
really hard to believe that you should be playing the Sarah version of whatever deck over like the Agamotto version. Because
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
compare what Sarah does to the card Bolts of Balthak, it's like, oh, that's actually the same card. Like, if you're playing 4
Yes.
cards with Sarah, that means you got 4 extra energy. That's what Bolts does. And so it's like, I kind of feel like anything existing in the space of like Shang Enchantress stuff would just be better off if it was just an Agamotto kitty kind of deck where it
Exactly.
was just doing that strong stuff anyway, instead of like gimmicky Starbrand stuff with Sarah. Hela lost a grand total of, like, I think it would be reasonable to describe it as basically 9 power, with the loss of Black Cat going down to a 2/6, and of course a point of power being stripped off of Hellcow, a point of power being stripped off of Swordmaster, and 3 points of power being stripped off of Hela. I don't think the deck is unplayable, but I do think that part of the major issue that I have with Hela is that in order for it to be a justifiable choice, it basically has to be successfully stat checking everything, or at least most of the metagame. And if it's not doing that, it is not a deck that I would always recommend people play. I know that like the Hela main at the top of Infinite, typically Danish is still playing the deck. I do think that these were fairly meaningful nerfs in a real sense, where the very easy version of the deck I think is now very clearly below 50% win rate. Like, that is not a deck that I think is very good right now. The Danish build, I mean, he's a wizard. We're going to see what he comes up with. That has happened before where Hela hasn't been good, but you play the Danish build well and it'll work out. We'll see. I have not been super impressed with her recently. And I think that that is the other major issue that I have with her, like, as a concept in the metagame, is if she's good, she's always squashing everything. And if she's not good, there's no middle ground for her. Whereas a card like Wiccan is basically 100% middle ground. Like, it'll never probably be the best deck, but it'll always be, like, just decent enough for you to try. And I feel like Hela just manages to dodge that entirely.
Yeah, this is quite funny. So firstly, you mentioned Wiccan. I want to talk a bit about that one.
Sure.
Yeah, Wiccan just feel like the mid-range of the mid-rangiest deck ever, right? Like it's just always going to be because the whole concept of Wiccan is just curve stone. You just want to play cards on curve. It's always going to be a mid-rangey style deck. But yeah, back to Hela. I find this hilarious also because like it feels like they have no idea what else to do with Hela's effect. So they're just like, all right, let's just remove points off of everything in the deck. But it works. In Marvel Snap, like removing points off of everything in the deck obviously matters a lot, right? Even this so-called combo deck where you remove points off of everything, yeah, it's definitely taken a big hit, right? Like you take points off of like all the big hitters in the deck, and then now every deck catches up. Like the fact that the mid-range decks can catch up to Hela right now makes it a bit less of a point to play Hela, because Hela is all about that one big swing at the final turn whereby no one catches up, right? But the thing is, even with the big swing now, the mid-range decks do catch up. So I think Hela definitely took a big hit. I'm glad, by the way, because like it's too simple, right? Don't you think it's just too simple?
I don't really. I don't have an issue with a deck being simple, to be clear. I actually think that they kind of tend to over nerf simple decks. Like just
I mean, Surtur was over nerfed, I feel.
Yeah, Surtur, Darkhawk, and even arguably now Hela, where it's like, okay, you're really like, wow, all right. Like even for me, a guy who was like, you should nerf Hela and just get rid of her entirely. I don't think I expected 4 targeted nerfs to the deck.
Yeah, like, it's like -1, -2, -3. All right, that should work.
Yeah, it's just like, it's the correct approach. It's just like, wow, you guys took that seriously. That's crazy. And I think a lot of why they took it seriously was probably like, it was doing really well no matter where they were. Like the thing about easy to play decks is they get overrepresented in their sample, I think. And yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Hela had just like phenomenal numbers, because it's not incredibly hard to play. Much like Surtur, where it's like there are intricacies and some people are better at the deck than others, and you can definitely notice that at a high level. But on average, there's really not that much to gain in terms of skill ceiling, which means that the deck is going to perform at a high level basically everywhere. And so I'm not going to say they over nerfed Hela, but I will say this. They typically, when you played Hela previously, it was very much like gambling, except you were the house. There were always a bunch of different things that could happen on the final turn of the game, but like the vast majority of them were in your favor, right? It now feels like you're actually just gambling. Like, if you're not discarding the Infinite, you're actually just gambling now. Like, and even if you are, you really needed to go in, like, actual lanes. You are now a customer at the casino rather than the guy running the casino.
Yeah, dude, the last point makes so much sense, man. Like, you know, sometimes when I go to the casino, I like to play these kind of like close to 50-50 games because there's less house age. Now, like, Hela being the customer, you know that you are definitely going to be less than 50% aged, right? And, like, that doesn't feel good for a deck that goes all in on that one play, you know?
Yeah, it used to be like you were at the casino and you were running the slot machines. You just had this massive edge built in. Now you're at the casino and like you're
just choosing player or banker and hoping right now.
Yeah. I think it's worth talking about 2. I think at this point it's clear to describe them as sort of like large power outliers in the current metagame. And those are Sam Wilson and Iron Patriot, who are going to be in many sort of, when we use the term mid-range, I think we've used it too liberally and it's become too wide of a swath to describe. Where for me, mid-range does require like some level of desire to interact with your opponent as well. Like cards like Red Guardian, cards like Shang-Chi, cards like Mobius, that where you're like, I'm playing a mid-range game plan where not all of my cards are just the best stats for the cost, but some of them are crucial effects to take my game plan over the top of things that would otherwise go over the top of me, right? Like that is sort of something that is crucial to mid-range in my mind. And Sam and Iron Patriot, I want to be clear about this, they're in more than just mid-range decks. Like when we talk about these cards, these are not like a mid-range core. I see people playing Iron Patriot in Hela because they can. And because it works. These are, Sam Wilson has the overlapping synergy with every ongoing deck ever. Those are not mid-rangey decks in the sense that I typically use the word. These are cards that go in a ton of stuff. They go in a massive amount of stuff. And Iron Patriot especially goes in just like stuff beyond belief. Like 50% of decks in the game are playing that. I will say, between these 2 cards, I personally believe that Sam Wilson is the stronger of the 2. And I know that the public stats we have back that up. I do think that Iron Patriot is a bit more swingy, though. Sam Wilson is stronger in an absolute sense, where it's just like, on average, he's going to be better. Iron Patriot has some inbuilt cube equity, despite his lack of win rate relative to Sam Wilson, which makes it a little bit closer than it otherwise would be, because the thing about cube rate is if you win more, you're going to win more cubes. The best way to have a good cube rate is to not lose games. And Sam Wilson helps you not lose games by a lot.
Yeah, so the thing about Iron Patriot is that it's very, okay, so both of these cards, it's very wrong a bit to say that they are inflexible because clearly they're in every damn deck, right? But Iron Patriot feels like slightly more unflexible than Sam Wilson, simply because you kind of have to consider winning a particular location with the Iron Patriot, right? So it kind of limits you. Once again, limit is a very loose word here because it's just they're just splashed everywhere. But like kind of limits you a little bit, right? Sam Wilson to me, even after the removal of the Cow Obsidian use case, still feels like it just can literally go anywhere. You know, like you mentioned, this card is just so flexible in terms of like cards splashed into every deck. I think Sam Wilson and Iron Patriot might be the ones that are splashed in the most decks in like Marvel Snap's history. I feel like maybe pre-nerf Zabu could be considered something like that. But other than that, I think these two cards really just can go anywhere. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that they removed I'm glad and sad that they removed the Sam Wilson's like Cow Obsidian synergy because I like that synergy a lot. But the card is still very useful in every deck, right? Like literally look at like all the top decks right now. You see these cards in like all of them, and I don't think this is gonna change anytime soon as long as these cards stay the same, like in terms of effect.
I will say this. I don't really even look at what happened to Sam and the Cull interaction as a nerf to Sam. I just don't think it is a meaningful one in the vast majority of cases here. It's just not a nerf to the card Sam Wilson. It's a nerf
after they screwed over the Surtur deck, then I guess it's less.
That's what it is. It's a nerf to Surtur. Like that nerf is not a nerf that actually affects Sam Wilson in a meaningful way. It is a nerf to Surtur. I'm going to make what may be a controversial statement right now. Loki has become the most overrated card in Marvel Snap by a pretty decent margin. This is a card that people got very excited about taking a point of power off, a point of cost off, and I understand the ethos behind getting excited for that. It makes sense, right? Like going from 2/2 to 1/2 is one of the biggest buffs they could ever give a card. And I think here's the sort of contrapositive of that, which is, I hope I use that word correctly, which is going from 2/2 to 1/2 is one of the biggest buffs they can ever give a card. Therefore, they're only gonna do it for cards that are really damn bad. Like that is like that is the thing I think they're missing with Loki, where it's like, yo, this card is like okay, I guess, but like current Loki and like current Zabu, for me, it's not even a conversation. I'd rather play Zabu, like absolutely, not even a question, because I am playing all of these, you know, 4s in my Agamotto deck. It just is happening, right? Loki is a card that is anything but an auto win button if you don't have card draw or if you're facing an opponent that's significantly synergistic, right? One of the things I was doing on day one was I played a lot of Silver Surfer. And the reason I played a lot of Silver Surfer was because, I don't know if you know this, but most of Silver Surfer's cards are really damn bad if you're a Loki deck. Like, if you're Lokiing and you get a Brood, that is ass. That is like so insanely unplayable for you because your whole thing is I need to be able to like scale upwards via these discounts by playing a bunch of cards. Brood takes up a ton of spots. You get like a Hope Summers. That's useless for you. You already are cheating the energy. It doesn't matter. You get like a Sebastian Shaw. That's a 3/4, my guy. Like, there's just like a lot of things in Surfer. So basically any deck more synergistic than Surfer is going to give anyone playing Loki fits. And I think one of the things that happened on day one was people like took like King Atri or whatever, or Zabu or whatever, out of the classically good Agamotto deck, and they put Loki in, and they were like, wow, I'm winning. And it's like, yeah, I can tell. Like, that's not the Loki doing that work. I think Loki is probably fine, but you need something that he actually can synergize with, and right now, there's not enough good card draw in this game. Don't even mention Adam Warlock to me to make that a real thing. So I think he's going to end up a Thanos card, an RSM card, and that might be it.
So I got a lot of things to say and also questions. Firstly, I have no idea what contrapositive is. KM said that at the start and I was very lost. But
I think I used it wrong. What I was trying to say was corollary. I'm an idiot, I think.
I still don't know what that means.
Okay, it means like what I was trying to say, corollary is like, here is the thought, and then there is an accompanying thought that goes along with it, which is like, this is one of the biggest buffs they can make. Ergo, the card was really bad, right? Like that. I was trying to say corollary. Like I said contrapositive instead. They're going to roast me in the comments. It's fine.
It's fine. I don't get it either. But okay, wait, no. Okay, so down to the real questions that I have to ask. Because, yeah, I was one of the people that when I saw the Loki change go to 1 mana, I was like, whoa, one more turn to maybe draw the good cards that you play after Loki, you know. But then the thing is, it doesn't work. Like, so I got actually a lot of questions because, like, Yeah, going from a 2-2 to 1-2 is, like you said, a huge buff, right? Like one more turn in Marvel Snap to do the things is huge, but it's not working. Is it because there are more counters to all these things in the meta right now, or are the decks in the game just not worth stealing their cards from? Like what changed, guys? Like it really, in my first impression was really, okay, this 1-2 Loki is gonna be awesome. Like I got Binks coming into my stream, literally on the demo of the nerf. It was hilarious. He came into my stream, it was like, Loki is good again. Then I was like, really? Then I went to look at the nerf and he sent me the link to the page and I went to read it. I was like, ooh, Loki is good again. But then nothing happened, man.
Nothing.
So like nothing happened, man. So I like I said, I don't always have the answers. I think like this topic just opens up more questions to me. So like what happened, guys? Why is it not good again? What 2-2 that became a 1-2 supposed to be good, right? But like why is it not good again, guys?
I have an answer. Loki's problem was, at least in this current form, never that he was a card that needed an extra turn. Loki actually definitely didn't need an extra turn and definitely didn't need energy off. What Loki needed was card draw. You slap card draw on this, and he's great. Loki has always been, whenever he's been good, here is my theory. Whenever this card has been good, it has been as a card draw engine. At the 3-5 form that we previously had, that drew a card. We also had, and I think this is crucial to understand, when it transformed your hand, that was also a card draw engine.
Draw, right?
Yes. Yeah. You were getting cards that were better than the cards that were in your hand, because everything in your hand was garbagey snow guard crap. And
okay,
so
I get it now. I get it now. Yeah.
What's happening here? That's my take.
Because the transform in your hand is literally immediate draw of new cards because your hand wasn't good enough, so you played the Loki, right? That's the draw.
That's the draw.
Because you were never going to play the cards in your hand anyway, that's why you play Loki. Okay,
so
I kind of get it now.
So it's effectively like drawing 5 cards. Like, it's like they're all
actually, just thinking of it that way is insane, right? Loki used to draw 5 new cards.
And now he's not drawing cards. Like, people has become, I think, a real pattern in Marvel Snap. People get really too attached to cheating energy. Like, they get really too attached to cheating energy, and they're like, oh my god, that's gotta be good. And it, like, so rarely is. Like, this is another one of those cases where it's like, yeah, man, cheating energy is cool, but, like, you're paying a real cost here, and the cost is, what if your opponent's deck is just bad for you to play? Or what if, like, just by going up to 12 cards, you end up making their Cassandra Nova big enough that you just lose? Like, there's just a bunch of stuff. Let's talk about Agamotto, who I think by this point I am fairly confident in saying is the weakest season pass released since Symbiote Spider-Man. Despite the fact that he has a massive play rate, is an exciting and unique card, and honestly is kind of a nerf candidate in the sense that he stands out in a way that cards like Iron Patriot and Sam Wilson rarely do, I think to me it is very clear when I look at all of the cards that have come out since then. 2 of them, of course, have been nerfed. 1 of them has been nerfed into the ground. Those are, of course, Agent, Venom, and Surtur. But in their release months, I think both of them were stronger than Agamotto. I think right now, Galacta, Sam, and Iron Patriot are far stronger than Agamotto, and in fact are doing a lot of work in propping him up. This is, as weird as that may sound, the weakest season pass card since the release of Symbiote Spider-Man. So, what does that mean? To me, what it means is, this is the ideal season pass card. It's far from busted. It's incredibly exciting. It's really cool. And it's definitely not broken in the way that, like, the previous few were.
So, I think this style of card... Okay, so I'm a bit biased because I like this style of card a lot. It's very option. You have a lot of options. There's a lot of varied ways to, like, play the deck and, like, play the cards, you know, from Agamotto and stuff like that. So, I want to give this deck a bit more, like, plus points. I feel like in the hands of a good player, you will win a lot of people just by skill diff, simply because the amount of options you have can be used to outplay. I'm just going to say that first, which I think is kind of true. But second thing is, I also agree that SD might be getting better at creating these kind of cards. You look at like the original Thanos and the original Arishem, insta-nerfed, right? They are getting better at creating these kind of like generate random or like stuff in your deck cards and like not make it too broken. I feel like they maybe tested the hell out of Agamotto and saying that, okay, this is fine to release like this, because like you look at the pre-nerf Thanos, look at pre-nerf Arishem, those are like insta-nerf. This one I feel like can stay this way for a little bit longer and it'll still be fine.
Yeah, like they have really gotten to a point with these cards where it's like, it's gonna feel awesome. It's gonna be at least strong enough to play. and it's not gonna be like haunting your nightmares. What's weird about it though is like I think people are so used to the season pass cards being so like really good that people
Right?
are acting like Agamotto is this. Like I see a lot of complaints about Winds of Watum, which is at best the third best spell. Like at best, that is the third best spell. I will say that I was wrong about one thing though, and it is that I thought originally that the one cost spell was the best spell. I think it now probably is the worst.
Yeah.
And the two spells that are the really good ones are bolts and images. Like those are the good ones. Winds is just like a card that I think is easy for a Marvel Snap player to look at and say, the numbers on this are unfair because they're looking at it as a card and not looking at it as a thing that people had to put in their deck and make their deck less consistent by putting it in their deck. Like people are looking at, it's like looking at a Thanos stone and saying this card is busted. It's like, yeah, it's purposefully balanced around the fact that you're not getting it all the time or that you're getting it less. Winds is like the third best spell at best. Like it is that is the one I see the most people complaining about, and I don't get it at all.
Yeah, I like that take, right? Wins would be busted if it doesn't cost you a draw. You get what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say?
Like, or if you could
it's
just put it
like
in your deck, right? If it was one of
Exactly,
12 cards
exactly.
instead of one of 16, that'd
Exactly.
be busted. I want Lamby to take the lead on this one because we're gonna talk about the
Okay,
Sandman
okay.
deck that I did a video on 2 days ago, which was pioneered by a buddy of Lamby's, really, named JD McDonaldinho, who's been like part of the Lamb fam for a very, very long
Yeah,
time.
dude.
And
He's
so,
also like
yeah, take it away.
Yeah, no, he's also like the guy that like created so many memes of my channel and coffee pastas. Yeah, I love the guy. He's still talking to me very consistently about anything that has to do with card games. I love the dude, man. Anyway, yeah, so this is his bay. I think him and I both loved Sandman for a long time already, and he was even playing this before it was really that good, like the Hela nerf and all that. But
You told
I
me
think
he was
now it's
playing this like a week ago, and I was like, wow, that's insane. That's an insane thing to
yeah.
do. Like,
He was playing this, well, maybe not a week ago, but he was playing
okay.
this like a while ago. But yeah, no, I think this deck finally has its time to shine simply because, well, Sandman is still insane. Like simply because it limits what your opponent can do, and obviously the amount of support that you play in this deck, right? It's not even like a lot of high statted cards.
Yeah.
It's just like individual good cards that you don't mind just like playing one card per turn, one card per turn. It all just scales perfectly. If all you and your opponent are both gonna end up playing only one card on the final turn, you've been playing good cards all the way to before the Sandman was played, right? You're probably gonna be ahead, because there's a lot of decks that like could like power spike on turn 6 and stuff like that. This deck just says no. I feel like Sandman is like the number one just say no card in the game in general. I mean, Mobius kind of is just say no as well, but Mobius is more like it's not really you can't really snap Mobius and your opponent stays into that, but I feel like if you snap Sandman, opponent might, I don't know how to explain this, but if your opponent snaps, how do you explain this, Kim? I don't know how to explain this, but I feel
don't
like
know how to explain it, but I can tell you that that is true.
Right?
I played this deck for 4 hours on stream, and I cannot tell you the amount of people that were just like,
That
I'm gonna
stayed
stay
into
into
the
the
Sandman,
Sandman.
right? They
Yes,
stay into the
Like,
Sandman. I don't know
people
why.
just stay, and
But
I
it
don't know
works.
why. They're like, it's not that bad. It is that bad, dude. Like,
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
it's because it's like such a soft block where it's like, I know I'm dead to like, it's because it's such a soft block, and the deck doesn't put that many points on the board that you're just like, am I seriously dead to this? Like, you just look at it and you're just like, their board is like entirely composed of
Yeah.
stuff with 5 power. And you're like, come on, I'm not dead to this. But you always are. And it's like,
No, I get it now. I
Yeah.
think it's because both bots look very like similar, right?
Yes.
Going into the Sandman turn. But the thing is, their deck is built to abuse the turn after the Sandman.
Correct.
Yours isn't. So it looks like fine. This looks fine to stay. But the thing is, their whole premise of their deck is to be better than you after the Sandman. So I think that's where people get caught.
Yeah. Do you beat a Doctor Doom and do you beat a Shang-Chi? Ask yourself those questions when you're playing against the Sandman deck, because if you can't, you're going to lose. That's just how it works.
Yep.
This topic is titled Mill, but I think I really want to use it to address something, which is something that I've seen a lot with Firehair is like, oh, we can finally mill people now. And I think it's worth talking about like the difference between winning a game and executing a game plan. Because when I think of what made Mill good, there's a litany of specific experiences and temporally based. Like this had to be a very specific time for the Mill deck to be good previously. And there were several things pushing towards that. The first was there were two very good combo decks that were actually uniquely vulnerable to the mill game plan and to the card Yondu specifically. And those combo decks were Move Bounce, where Yondu was getting rid of either Human Torch or one of the all-important movers that you are trying to bounce, and
Literally
Mr. Negative,
anything.
where getting rid of all that stuff is really, really good, right? The second one, the second thing that made it very important was that if you weren't playing one of those two combo decks, you were definitely playing an Iron Patriot deck, and Mill was the best deck at contesting Iron Patriot lanes and at going over the top of Iron Patriot lanes. That was because of being a good deck in the context of having great 3-drops, and also because in a mid-range mirror, having a very cheap death is a very good way to offset a lost Iron Patriot, because your thing is probably bigger than theirs. The third thing that was really important about this was nobody was playing Mobius, which is very, very, very not true right now and shuts down that whole death thing. And so we are now in a situation where Mill is, even before the nerf to Yondu, which made it really unplayable, very close to unplayable. Like, very not good. So, what is it that keeps people coming back to this crap, Lamby? I need you to speak on this as like someone who has seen in Hearthstone all sorts of bad decks see high play rates. What is it? What is the thing?
Yeah. Okay, actually there's a lot of things that I want to talk about in this topic. Firstly, I'm gonna answer something that like it's not about this first, which is, remember you mentioned that Mobius is everywhere right now.
Yeah, it's a good card.
I think that whole Surtur nerf thing really allowed Mobius to shine again, because remember how we used to say that, like,
he was not
like, because
doing
when
his
you
job.
play a Mobius, they play a 3/10 or whatever. Yeah, so like that's not happening anymore. So Mobius time to shine comes back. Okay, that's out of the way. Second thing is also, I feel like the thing about milling opponents deck is like it's always about this impression that you're doing something useful. You know, like if you're putting a rock in your opponent's deck with Korg or Rock Slide, it's like, oh my god, they might draw the rock, but actually what's winning you is the Dark Hawk. It's for sure bigger. You know,
Yes.
that's the important thing. So mill is like, I'm getting rid of a card from their deck, but what's for sure happening was that I was probably winning an Iron Patriot lane, you know, that kind of thing.
Or that my death
that
was getting discounted. Yes, that is guaranteed to happen.
Yeah. So the off chance that you mill something useful was only relevant in the scenario whereby you talked about that case whereby you're milling a piece of the deck, whereby if it gets milled, their deck just cannot work, which is move bounce, maybe the Hela, you know, that kind of thing.
It was
like
never
wombo
Hela though,
combos.
because Yondu was never hitting the right stuff in Hela to make that
Oh,
happen.
right, yeah.
So it was like only Move Bounce and Mr. Negative, and those were the two combo decks at the time.
Yeah. Basically, the mill portion matters the most if like you hit a piece of the deck and the deck insta dies, which is not the case of almost every deck right now, right? Like every deck functions right now without half of their deck. They have engines, like you have like so many things in the deck that just put points. You don't really care if one of it is missing, you know. So I feel like mill right now, the only thing going for it right now is it still runs quite a decent amount of points, but is it enough? Probably not.
And I think you said a word there that really triggered something in me, which is engines. Because the two things that Mill hates to see, if you're milling someone out, what you hate to see are they have an engine and they have options, right? The whole point of milling them out is that they won't have options. They will not have options. You'll be able to limit them, but you just don't do it fast enough. And even with a Firehair, you're not doing it before turn 4. So you're denying 2 draws, which is good. But nobody's out here acting like playing Silver Samurai Black Bolt is broken. That's also denying 2 draws. It's not gonna do what you want it to do. And so, like, this is a thing where it's like, this is fine, I guess, if you have it attached to everything else. But if this is your plan A, you're going to lose to everyone with an engine and everyone who has any sort of redundancy or backup plan. Because guess what? They have cards in their hand. And frankly, a lot of the time, those cards are making other cards.
Yeah, and also most decks now have very flexible engines.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching that video. As always, I have been KMBest. He has been Lamby Series. This show is back on Spotify, so make sure to check that out. Link in the description. As always, Lamby's going to take us out here. Lamby, it's all you.
All right, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.